So I just came across this insane story. So it's about in Tampa Bay, a neo-Nazi just converted to Islam and then killed his neo-Nazi pals. So let me get to some quotes from the Raw Story article about it. And I'm actually going to censor his full name, and I'm not going to show you his picture because, well, I'll get into that after the quotes. 18-year-old Devin is being accused by police of gunning down two of his roommates after they attacked his newfound Muslim faith. According to police, Devin was upset at Islamophobia and decided to murder his two roommates to bring attention to his cause. Prior to converting to Islam, Devin was a committed white supremacist, as were his two slain roommates. So after Devin killed his two roommates, he then went on to a smoke shop, taking 3 hostages, and then eventually turned himself in. So he claimed his goal was not only to draw attention to American foreign policy in the Muslim world, but also to take some of the neo-Nazis with him as part of his murderous rampage. Now, this is why I'm not showing you his picture or telling you his full name. I don't want to give attention to this guy because I believe that he's mentally ill. I believe the vast majority, if not all, of the so-called terrorism that happens in the West or from Westerners is mental illness. And this guy is the perfect example of that. Here is somebody who was a neo-Nazi and then converts to Islam and then kills his roommates. So this is somebody who clearly isn't very principled in his positions. He goes from one extreme to the other, though it could be argued that being a Nazi and an Islamic terrorist are kind of still both on the same side of the spectrum. But he goes on this murderous rampage claiming it's about Islam when it's clearly not. Now, absolutely, there can be triggers. So I believe that religion can be a trigger. So you may have an underlying mental illness, and then you find religion, and then that triggers you into becoming this quote-unquote crazy person. But the trigger isn't the underlying problem. The underlying problem is the mental illness, the inability to be rational. And how do you best treat this irrationality? With healthcare. So where there's access to proper healthcare, there's often less mental illness, or I should say less mental illness that affects society in this sort of way, less violence. And that's because people like this Devin dude are properly treated, and then shit like this doesn't happen. So I guess my overall point here is when we look at terrorism, we shouldn't look at it as a religion-based issue. Now, I'm not religious. I don't like religion. I feel that it does more harm than good in general. But just because I don't like religion doesn't mean it's to blame for terrorism. A lot of the terrorism that comes from the Middle East comes from people that didn't have anything else. They didn't have much of a future. So they end up in these sort of gangs like we see here in the West, but these gangs are based in religion. So much like the prevalence of gangs in the West, the gangs in the Middle East rise from a lack of opportunity, a lack of access to proper paying jobs and to education and to healthcare. So when you take opportunity and education and healthcare out of a community, or the community that doesn't have it to begin with, this is what ends up happening. You end up getting people who end up in these sorts of gangs. And then you also end up with people who are the extreme case of it, which is someone who is mentally ill that can end up murdering people because they believe it's because of the religion they're in. When we know someone who was a neo-Nazi and is now part of Islam, they're clearly not a very principled person. They're very unstable. And that's what happened in this case. So when we look at trying to battle terrorism, we should actually be looking at how to fix economic anxiety. Because when people have economic opportunity and they make proper wages and they can support their family and they have healthcare, there's less anxiety, there's less worry, there's less mental illness, there's less being frightened. So gangs are less common. Violence is less common because people are happy. And when people are happy, they tend not to go as crazy.